They laughed when you were at your lowest. Not loud, not always in your face. Sometimes it was quieter than that. A smirk, a look, a silence that said everything. You felt it. You felt it when they doubted you, when they ignored you, when they treated you like you were nothing. And the worst part? You stayed quiet. You swallowed it. You told yourself it didn't matter. You pretended you were above it. But you weren't. Because deep down, it burned. That kind of disrespect doesn't disappear. It doesn't fade. It sits inside you, waiting, growing. And one day, it changes you. You stop explaining yourself. You stop chasing approval. You stop being the version of you that begged to be understood. Because now you understand something else. Respect is never given to the weak. It's taken. Not with noise, not with anger, but with transformation so brutal, so undeniable that nobody dares question you again. See, most people think revenge is loud. They imagine shouting, fighting, proving a point. That's not revenge. That's desperation. Real revenge is silence. It's when you disappear. When you stop showing up for people who never valued your presence. When you cut the emotional supply they were feeding on. And suddenly, they feel it. Your absence becomes louder than your presence ever was. But that's just the beginning, because the real revenge isn't what they feel. It's what you become. You see, pain has two paths. One, it destroys you, turns you bitter, weak, angry at everything. You start blaming the world. You stay stuck in the same place, replaying the same memories, living the same life. That's the path most people choose. It's easy. The second path? It hardens you. It strips away illusions. It forces you to see people for what they really are. It forces you to see yourself without excuses. And that's where it gets dangerous. Because now, you're not emotional anymore. You're calculated. You stop reacting. You start observing. You notice who only shows up when you're useful, who disappears when you're struggling, who pretends to support you but secretly hopes you fail. You see everything. And once you see it, you can't unsee it. That's the moment you change. You stop trusting words. You start trusting patterns. You stop giving second chances. You start giving distance. You stop explaining your worth. You start building it. Brick by brick, day by day, in silence. Because here's the truth nobody tells you. The world doesn't care about your pain. It only responds to power. Not loud power, not fake confidence, real power. The kind that comes from discipline, from waking up when you don't feel like it, from working when nobody's watching, from pushing through when everything inside you is tired. That's where revenge is built. Not in arguments, not in proving people wrong with words, but in becoming someone they can't ignore anymore. Someone they can't replace. Someone they underestimated and now regret. But here's where most people fail. They start and then they stop. Because it's hard. Because it's lonely. Because nobody claps for you in the beginning. There's no audience, no validation, no recognition. Just you and your thoughts and your past whispering to you, telling you to go back, to stay comfortable, to stay the same. Because change is painful, growth is uncomfortable, and revenge built through success, that requires something most people don't have: patience. You don't get stronger in a day. You don't build power overnight. You don't transform your life in a week. It takes months, years of showing up when nobody cares, of improving when nobody notices, of winning in silence. That's the part people don't talk about. They only see the end. They see the success, the confidence, the results. They don't see the nights you questioned everything. They don't see the days you felt like quitting. They don't see the moments you almost gave up, but didn't. Because that's where the real transformation happens. Not when it's easy, but when it's unbearable and you keep going anyway. That's when you start becoming dangerous. Because now you're not driven by emotion anymore. You're driven by purpose. You don't need motivation. You don't need approval. You don't need anyone to believe in you. You've seen what happens when you rely on others. They disappoint you. So you stop relying. You start building yourself into someone who doesn't need anything from anyone. That's power. And once you taste that, you never go back. You don't chase people anymore. You don't beg for attention. You don't tolerate disrespect because you know your value. And more importantly, you're proving it every single day.
In the gym, in your work, in your mindset, you become obsessed, not with them, but with yourself, your growth, your discipline, your future. And slowly, everything starts to shift. Your body changes, your mind sharpens, your presence becomes heavier. People notice, not because you told them to, but because they can feel it. That quiet confidence, that controlled energy, that look in your eyes that says you've been through something and you didn't break. That's when things get interesting. Because now, the same people who ignored you start watching you. The same people who doubted you start questioning themselves. The same people who disrespected you start showing respect. Not because they changed, but because you did. And that's the ultimate shift. You realize it was never about them. It was always about you. Your standards, your discipline, your willingness to evolve. Revenge isn't about hurting them. It's about outgrowing them completely, to the point where their opinion doesn't even matter anymore, to the point where their presence or absence changes nothing. That's freedom. But don't get it twisted. This isn't easy. You will feel alone. You will feel misunderstood. You will question if it's worth it. Because the higher you go, the fewer people understand you. That's the price. And most people can't pay it. They'd rather stay average, stay comfortable, stay surrounded by people who don't challenge them, don't inspire them, don't push them. But you've seen too much. You've felt too much. You can't go back to being that version of yourself, the one who tolerated disrespect, the one who settled, the one who stayed small just to fit in. That version is gone, and what replaces it is something far more powerful. But it's still incomplete, because transformation is a process, and you're only at the beginning. Right now, you're building. You're learning control. You're learning discipline. You're learning how to turn pain into fuel. But the real test, that's coming. Because success changes everything. It tests your mindset. It tests your discipline. It tests your ability to stay focused when distractions multiply. And most importantly, it tests whether you're doing this for them or for yourself. Because if it's still about them, you're still weak. Real power comes when you don't care anymore. When your success isn't a message to anyone, it's just who you are. And that shift, that's where everything changes.
And that's where most people collapse. Right at the edge of becoming something real, they fall back into the same trap. They start chasing validation again. Not openly, not obviously, but in subtle ways. They check who's watching. They wait for reactions. They measure their progress based on other people's attention. And just like that, they lose their edge. Because the moment you perform for others, you lose control of yourself. You become dependent again, and dependency is weakness. You didn't come this far to need approval again. You didn't rebuild yourself just to hand your power back to the same world that broke you. So understand this clearly. The journey you're on requires isolation. Not forever, but long enough to break the addiction. The addiction to attention, the addiction to being liked, the addiction to being understood. Because none of that builds power. It builds comfort, and comfort kills growth. So you pull back. You speak less. You observe more. You stop explaining your plans. You stop announcing your moves. Because you've learned something critical. People don't need to know what you're doing. They only need to see what you've done. And by the time they see it, it's already too late. Too late to doubt you. Too late to stop you. Too late to catch up. That's how you move now. Quiet, precise, unpredictable. Like someone who has nothing to prove, but everything under control. But don't think for a second that it gets easier. It doesn't. It gets heavier. Because now, you're not just fighting your past, you're fighting your mind. The same mind that tries to sabotage you. The same mind that whispers, "Take a break. You've done enough. You deserve comfort." And it sounds convincing. Because it knows you. It knows your weaknesses, your habits, your old patterns. It knows exactly where to hit. And if you listen, even once, you start slipping. One missed day becomes two. Two becomes a week. A week becomes a version of you that you promised you'd never go back to. That's how people lose everything. Not in one moment, but in small, quiet compromises. That's why discipline is everything. Not motivation. Motivation fades. Discipline stays. Discipline doesn't care how you feel. It doesn't negotiate. It doesn't hesitate. It doesn't ask for permission. It moves every day, no matter what. And that's what separates you now. You don't wait to feel ready. You act, and readiness follows. You don't wait to feel strong. You move, and strength builds. That's the mindset. Cold, focused, relentless. Because you've seen what happens when you rely on feelings. You become inconsistent, and inconsistency destroys progress. So you remove emotions from the equation. You create systems, routines, standards, things you follow no matter what. Because standards don't break. People do. And you're not that person anymore. Now here's where it gets even deeper. As you evolve, you start noticing something strange. You don't fit in anymore. Not with your old circle, not with your old habits, not even with your old thoughts. Conversations feel shallow. People feel predictable. Drama feels pointless. And suddenly, you're alone again. But this time, it's chosen. You're not alone because you're rejected. You're alone because you've outgrown everything that once defined you. And that kind of loneliness, it's powerful. Because in that space, you find clarity. You start thinking deeper. You start seeing further. You start understanding things most people ignore. And that understanding, it sharpens you. You become more aware, of opportunities, of threats, of energy. You can walk into a room and read it in seconds. Who's real? Who's fake? Who's strong? Who's pretending? Because you've studied people. Not through books, through experience, through pain, through betrayal. And that's a kind of knowledge you can't fake. It's earned. And once you have it, you move differently. You trust slower. You invest carefully. You protect your time like it's your most valuable asset. Because it is. Time is the only thing you don't get back. Not money, not attention, not opportunities. Time. And now, you don't waste it. Not on pointless conversations, not on toxic people, not on things that don't move you forward. You become selective, focused, intentional. And that's when your life starts accelerating, because all your energy is aligned. No distractions, no leaks, no nonsense, just progress. Relentless progress. But here's the part nobody prepares you for. As you rise, people change, or at least it feels like they do. Friends become distant, support becomes silent, energy shifts, and you start wondering, why? Why now? Why when you're finally improving do people pull away? Why when you're becoming stronger does the room feel colder? Here's the truth. You didn't just change your life. You changed your position. And not everyone is comfortable with that. Some people liked you better when you were struggling, when you were easier to relate to, easier to control, easier to ignore. Your growth, it exposes them. It reminds them of what they're not doing, of the risks they didn't take, of the discipline they didn't build. And that makes them uncomfortable. So they distance themselves. Not always out of hate, sometimes out of insecurity. But the result is the same. They fade away, and you're left with fewer people, but stronger clarity. And this is where your mindset is tested again, because it's easy to feel bitter, to think, they switched on me, they don't support me, they don't deserve me. But that thinking, it's a trap, because it pulls you back into emotion, and emotion clouds judgment. You don't need to hate them. You don't need to prove anything to them. You just need to keep moving forward, always forward. Because this journey was never meant to be crowded. It was meant to refine you, to strip away everything unnecessary, until all that's left is strength, clarity, control. And that's where you're heading. But you're not there yet, because the final stage requires something even harder. Letting go. Not just of people, but of the past version of you that still wants recognition, that still remembers the disrespect, that still wants to show them what they lost. Because as long as that part of you exists, you're still tied to them. And true power, it has no attachments. It doesn't look back. It doesn't seek approval. It doesn't need revenge. It becomes something greater, something untouchable. And that is where everything changes.
And now you face the truth most people will never reach. Revenge was never the destination. It was the spark, the thing that woke you up, the thing that pulled you out of weakness, the thing that forced you to see reality for what it is. But if you're still holding on to it now, you're still a prisoner, because revenge keeps you connected to the past. It keeps your focus on people who don't matter anymore, and every second you spend thinking about them is a second you're not becoming who you're meant to be. So this is where the final shift happens. You let it go. Not because they deserve peace, but because you deserve power. Real power. the kind that doesn't react, the kind that doesn't chase, the kind that doesn't even acknowledge disrespect, because it exists on a level where disrespect can't reach. You stop trying to prove anything to anyone, and something strange happens. You feel lighter, clearer, more focused than ever before, because now your energy is yours fully. No leaks, no distractions, no emotional chains pulling you backward, just direction. Forward, always forward. And this is where your transformation becomes undeniable, not just to others, but to yourself. You wake up with purpose, not because you're angry, but because you're disciplined. You move with intention, not because you're trying to impress, but because you've built standards that don't allow you to fall. You don't chase success anymore. You embody it. It's in the way you think, the way you speak, the way you carry yourself. Calm, controlled, unshaken. Because you've already faced the worst. You've been ignored, disrespected, underestimated, and you survived it. So now, nothing scares you. Not opinions, not rejection, not failure. Because you understand something most people never will. Failure isn't the enemy. Stagnation is. And you've already escaped that. You've already broken out of the cycle most people die in. Wake up, complain, stay the same, repeat. That's not your life anymore. Now, every day has weight. Every action has intention. Every decision builds something. And over time, that compounds. Quietly, relentlessly. Your skills grow. Your mindset sharpens. Your presence becomes undeniable. You walk into rooms and people feel it. Not because you're loud, but because you're certain. Certain of who you are, certain of what you bring, certain of what you no longer tolerate. And that certainty, it commands respect. Without asking, without forcing, without explaining. Because real power doesn't introduce itself, it's recognized. And the same people who once doubted you, they see it now. They feel the difference. The silence hits them harder than any words ever could. Your success becomes their reminder of what they said, of how they treated you, of what they failed to see. But here's the part that completes the transformation. You don't react. You don't go back. You don't even acknowledge it. Because you're not doing this for them anymore. You're not living your life as a response. You're living it as a standard. And that changes everything. Because now, there's no finish line. No moment where you say, I've made it. There's only evolution. Constant. Unstoppable. You keep building. You keep refining. You keep pushing. Not out of pain, but out of purpose. Because you've learned to love the process, the grind, the discipline, the solitude. The very things that once felt like punishment now feel like power. And that's when you become truly dangerous. Because you're no longer driven by emotion. You're driven by identity. This is who you are now. Someone who doesn't break. Someone who doesn't fold. Someone who doesn't need validation to keep going. You've removed every weakness that once controlled you. The need for approval, the fear of rejection, the attachment to outcomes. Gone. And what's left? Focus, clarity, execution. Day after day, year after year. You become a force that can't be stopped. Not because you're lucky, but because you're consistent. And consistency beats everything. Talent fades, motivation dies,
Hype disappears, but discipline, it builds empires. Quietly, patiently, relentlessly. And one day, you look back, not with anger, not with regret, but with understanding. You realize everything that hurt you, everything that broke you, everything that pushed you to the edge was necessary. It shaped you, it refined you, it forced you to become something greater. And without it, you'd still be the same person. Lost, comfortable, invisible. But not anymore. Now you're something else. Something sharper, something stronger, something untouchable. And the world sees it, not because you told them, but because you became it. That's the final level, where success isn't revenge, it's identity. Where power isn't forced, it's natural. Where your presence alone speaks louder than anything you could ever say. So let them remember you however they want. Let them talk, let them watch, let them wonder how you did it. Because you know the truth. You didn't get lucky, you didn't get help, you didn't get handed anything. You built it. From pain, from silence, from moments nobody saw. And now, you don't need revenge anymore, because you've already won. Not over them, but over yourself. And that is a victory nobody can ever take from you.